I do want to touch on your point about statistics and touches, and we had some conversation this morning about the 10% not really being the story and the over focus, if you will, on 10% of advisors. And you mentioned you look at all advisors. I think something like 30% of the assets are covered. And if you look at the whole picture, you can come up with a lot of additional touches that you have with investment advisors over and above this 10%. So in some respects, there's been too much of a laser focus on that one number and not looking at the entire investment advisor examination oversight program.
So, I mean, there's a number of other, to just expand on what you described, I can tell you from my own experience, I was an examiner not less than 2 years ago, and I was an SSE and hedge fund. So a region would come to me and say, look, we have 4 hedge fund exams planned for next year. Here are the 12 funds that have popped on our radar screen. Can you help us determine which one? So I'd spend a couple of weeks pouring through 12 firms to figure out which ones represented the highest risk based on my information, and we bring other people into the dialogue. We don't get credit for the other 8 that we just spent countless hours reviewing. The other thing is we do a lot with our friends in Rio, and Dave and I attend these in the large firm engagement. So we go
risk examinations
Risk and exam office, right?
Right, in IM.
And we liaise quite almost on a daily, well, at least mine, I know on a daily basis with the staff, but Dave and I are almost on a daily basis on this. And we go out and we see the registrants. We're talking to them. We're figuring out, we're asking them. We don't want to meet for the first time under a mushroom cloud. We want to say, what risks do you see? What do you see in the landscape that could be of concern that we should get more information on? Right, you're running a risk-based program. That doesn't mean every time one of the teams crosses the threshold of a restaurant, we think there's been a violation of federal securities laws. There might be a new product being developed. There might be a new business that's getting developed that we want to go get some information on. And that registrant might have addressed all those concerns and have controls that are just absolutely spot on. But we want to inform policy of the risks that we see. So we have all these outreach events such as this. We're doing our national outreach as well. So there's countless ways. And so you mentioned the metric of 10%. Look, I don't think any of you would go to any of your portfolio managers and say you have a PE of 16. Wow, that seems high. Right? No one manages the complex businesses that we manage to one metric. So we look at our enforcement referrals. We're looking at our touches in terms of the outreach. We're looking at the information that we provide policy. We're looking at the sweeps that we provide, the impact that we've had with cybersecurity and the likes. So with all that, that's one metric. But if you had to ask me how I would look at it, what credibility do we have with this group? We're trying to develop a partnership with them. We're not trying to be a gotcha regulator. We want to let them benefit from what we see, whether or not they're examined. Right?
Right. Right, and we appreciate the transparency of you're going out and doing a sweep or a set of exams and then feeding back out to the industry what you saw. And that's extremely valuable, what deficiencies you saw, what best practices you saw, and we certainly encourage you to continue to do that. I do want to step back for a minute and make sure that everyone is on the same page with respect to the new examiners that you've hired. How many last year, how many this year, how many shifting from broker-dealer?
I thought we got past that.
Land, and do you continue with this kind of trend? So in terms of as you get new examiners, are you going to continue to allocate a higher share of them to the investment advisor space?
I would think so. Despite all our efficiency requests, so we hired 7, we had 91 last year, 70 were dedicated to the IAIC space. We're trying to shift over resources now. We're working with all of our stakeholders to shift an amount that's similar, plus we've been allocated around 30. So again, I would think for the risks that we have in the marketplace, our best capital allocation or resource allocation will continue to be to the IAIC space. So we're going to continue to try and drive that, to try and drive efficiencies, get increased coverage ratios. But let's also be clear, we don't control the number of new registrants. So in the past 2 years, we've had over 1,000 new registrants in the IAIC space. So at times Jane might feel like she's running on a wheel. But again, we can only do what we have with the resources that we have.
There was a comment this morning, I think, actually by Bob Plays, to note the success of the presence exams and how, and I think Ken Berman made a comment about that too, how valuable they are, the process of them, and the efficient way that increased the touches in a certain segment. Is that something that you're going to continue or expand to other areas?
Well, I think we have. You mentioned what you like, and I think having been a registrant, I would like as well, in terms of, okay, tell us what you're going to see. So we've been very transparent. We not only put our priorities out, which I can touch about how we developed those, but also let's take presence exam, which was a great initiative. We sent a letter to all the new registrants, said welcome. We're going to endeavor to get to 25% of those new registrants under Dodd-Frank in a 3-year period. We did so. And then we reported back. Then Director Bowden had a speech, you recall. I followed that up a year later with a speech about what we saw in the industry. So I agree with Bob. I like that playbook. So what have we done? We've taken that and we've applied that to another key risk area, which is cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, what do we do in phase 1? We told everyone we're going to go do some cyber exams. We went out, we asked a series of questions and collected that information from, I think it was roughly 50 BDs and 50 IAIC firms. We then went back out and said, this is what we saw with that data. And then we saw, okay, here are the key risks as a result of that. So again, taking the information from one exam and making the next sweep or exam even better. We published, again, here's what we're going to be looking at. So, we're trying to be transparent. We're executing on those exams now. We'll see what happens when we come back and if there's some things that we can share with industry. So again, so even people who aren't examined can benefit from them. I think we as capital markets benefit from that.